Welcome to Heaven-Bound Creations. What if I told you that everything you think you know about the beginning of the world comes from just 50 chapters of ancient text? Today we're diving deep into the book of Genesis from the King James Bible, a collection of stories so profound they've shaped human civilization for thousands of years. But here's what most people miss: Genesis isn't just about creation. It's a masterpiece of human drama, divine intervention, and the foundation of three major world religions. The word Genesis literally means beginning, and that's exactly where our journey starts. Picture this: complete darkness, absolute nothingness, then suddenly a voice speaks light into existence. The King James Version opens with those iconic words about God creating the heavens and the earth, but what unfolds next is far more intricate than most people realize. The creation account spans 7 days, each building upon the last with mathematical precision. Day 1 brings light separating from darkness. Day 2 creates the firmament, dividing waters above from waters below. Day 3 forms dry land and fills it with vegetation. Day 4 positions the sun, moon, and stars as celestial timepieces. Day 5 populates the seas and skies with living creatures. Day 6 brings forth land animals and culminates with humanity's creation in God's own image. But here's where it gets fascinating: the seventh day introduces something revolutionary. Rest, not because God was tired, but to establish a pattern for human existence. This concept of Sabbath would later become fundamental to Jewish, Christian, and even secular understanding of work-life balance. Now let's talk about Adam and Eve, because their story is far more complex than the Sunday school version. They're placed in Eden, a paradise where every need is met, with just one restriction: don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. This isn't arbitrary, it represents the fundamental human struggle between obedience and autonomy, between trusting divine wisdom and relying on personal understanding. The serpent's temptation introduces humanity's first moral crisis. Notice the psychology here: the serpent doesn't force anything. Instead, he plants doubt, questions God's motives, and appeals to human pride. Eve sees the fruit is good for food, pleasant to the eyes, and desirable to make one wise. These three temptations, physical appetite, aesthetic desire, and intellectual pride, would echo throughout human history. Their disobedience brings consequences that reshape everything. Death enters the world. Relationships become strained. Work becomes toilsome. Yet even in judgment, there's a promise of redemption through Eve's offspring. This proto-gospel becomes the thread connecting Genesis to the rest of biblical narrative. But Genesis doesn't stop there. Cain and Abel's story introduces humanity's first murder, born from jealousy and rejected worship. Cain's offering of crops versus Abel's animal sacrifice reveals something profound about approaching the divine. It's not just what you offer, but the heart behind the offering that matters. The genealogies that follow aren't boring lists, they're carefully constructed records showing how sin spreads through humanity while God preserves a righteous lineage. Names like Enoch, who walked with God and never experienced death, stand out like beacons of hope in an increasingly dark world. Then comes the flood narrative, one of the most universally known stories in human history. But Genesis presents it not as random destruction, but as divine surgery, removing corruption while preserving righteousness through Noah's family. The ark becomes a symbol of salvation through faith and obedience, while the Rainbow Covenant afterward establishes God's promise never to destroy the world by flood again. The Tower of Babel follows, explaining human linguistic diversity through humanity's prideful attempt to build a tower reaching heaven. This story reveals a pattern: when humans try to make names for themselves independent of God, confusion and scattering result. Everything changes with Abraham's calling in chapter 12. Here we meet a man who would become the father of faith, asked to leave everything familiar and trust God's promises about land, descendants, and blessing. Abraham's journey from Ur to Canaan represents every believer's spiritual journey, from bondage to freedom, from doubt to faith. Abraham's life unfolds through a series of tests and promises. The covenant ceremony, where God alone passes between the sacrificed animals while Abraham sleeps, demonstrates that salvation depends on God's faithfulness, not human performance. The birth of Isaac to elderly Sarah proves God's power over natural impossibility. But the ultimate test comes when God asks Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, the son of promise. This narrative reaches heights of psychological tension rarely matched in literature. Abraham's willingness to obey, Isaac's submission, and God's last-minute provision of a substitute sacrifice all point to deeper spiritual realities about faith, surrender, and divine provision. Isaac's story, though shorter, continues the themes through his marriage to Rebekah and the birth of twins Esau and Jacob. The sibling rivalry between these brothers introduces themes of election and destiny that will echo throughout Scripture. Jacob's theft of Esau's blessing reveals how God's purposes can work even through human deception and family dysfunction. Jacob's transformation from deceiver to Israel happens through wrestling with God himself. This mysterious encounter at Peniel shows how divine encounters change us permanently. Jacob emerges with a new name, a limp, and a blessing, wounded but transformed. The Joseph narrative occupies the final 14 chapters and reads like a masterfully crafted novella. Favored son becomes slave, prisoner becomes prime minister, family betrayal leads to national salvation. Joseph's story demonstrates how God works through suffering to accomplish greater purposes. The dreams that drive Joseph's story, both his own prophetic visions and his interpretation of others' dreams, show divine communication breaking into human consciousness. Pharaoh's butler and baker, then Pharaoh himself, all receive crucial information through dreams that Joseph interprets. Joseph's forgiveness of his brothers who sold him into slavery provides one of Scripture's most powerful examples of grace overcoming evil. His declaration that what they meant for evil, God meant for good, becomes a foundational truth about divine sovereignty working through human choices. The book concludes with Jacob's prophetic blessings over his 12 sons, establishing the tribal identities that would define Israel's future. Joseph's death in Egypt, with instructions to carry his bones back to Canaan, sets up the Exodus narrative that follows in subsequent books. Throughout Genesis, several themes weave together consistently. Divine election shows God choosing specific individuals and families for his purposes. Human responsibility runs alongside divine sovereignty, showing how God works through willing human agents. The promise of redemption through offspring threads from Eden through Abraham to Judah's messianic blessing. Genesis establishes patterns that echo throughout Scripture: paradise lost and the promise of restoration, judgment followed by mercy, human failure met with divine faithfulness. These themes resonate because they reflect universal human experiences of moral failure, longing for redemption, and hope for something better. The book's literary artistry rivals any ancient text. Repeated phrases create emphasis, genealogies provide structure, and narrative parallels connect different stories. The King James translation captures much of this beauty through its rhythmic, memorable phrasing that has influenced English literature for centuries. Genesis matters today because it addresses fundamental questions every human asks. Where did we come from? Why do we suffer? What's our purpose? How should we relate to the divine? The answers Genesis provides have shaped Western civilization's understanding of human dignity, moral responsibility, and cosmic purpose. Whether viewed as literal history, theological truth, or literary masterpiece, Genesis remains unparalleled in its influence on human thought and culture. Its stories continue speaking to contemporary audiences because they capture timeless truths about divine nature, human condition, and the relationship between Creator and creation. Thank you for watching us here at Heavenbound Creations. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe for future content. We hope you have a blessed day.